All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of Magic Mics. We get started as we do each and every week by introducing my two co-hosts. There is Ruben Bressler.
Hello.
And there's Aaron Campbell. And you can stay tuned after this week's episode for a special announcement regarding Magic Mics and our new subreddit and how you can help support the show. But that's at the end of the episode. We're going to start with the first pick. That's what we do around here. And the first pick has to be spoilers. We're in the middle of spoiler season. This is our 4 Christmases a year. And, you know, we kind of get to just kind of live in it a little bit. And
4 Hanukkahs.
Yes, 4 special holiday seasons.
Right.
And
It is a little bit more like Hanukkah because it's spread out.
Yeah,
because
they
individual day doesn't have a ton.
Well, except New Phyrexia. And then that was just like...
Right. Yeah.
But... that's okay. I will note that there's this kind of... I don't know if it's just like this kind of player expectation that's been living in our heads that every set has to be like unbelievably overwhelming or every card has to be like smack you in the face good. Even when cards like, you know, like Treasure Cruise, you know, like this card is not very good. Who's going to be playing this crap? You know, a common gets restricted in Vintage. You have Siege Rhino that got like no respect. Like Patrick Chapin had to write a whole article saying this card is completely ridiculous. And then, oh, wow, it just so happens to like completely run the format. So I think Battle for Zendikar is looking really weird. And I think that's a good thing. I think they wanted that to look like really strange, and you're like, well, this card relies on like a card being exiled. How often is that even going to happen? Otherwise, you don't get your trigger for the new Mana War or the new the -3/-3 guy when he comes into play. And you know, it feels like, I don't know if it's one of those where it's expectations just not being reality, or it's just the expectations are so high. Ruben, how do you feel about sort of the tone and the climate revolving the spoilers these days?
I was actually relatively surprised by how negative people were about this fall set. Usually there's a ton of excitement about the fall set, especially because we're returning to a place we've been before, Zendikar. There's a returning keyword that everybody loves, landfall. It makes games exciting. It makes the limited format good. You have these new Awaken cards that make lands even better than they were, and lands are great because they help you cast your spells, and now your spells are also lands. It's awesome. I don't know, it's kind of weird how everyone's kind of negative about a lot of these cards. I think that it's just a symptom of being kind of jaded, you know, like you see some of these cards and you're like, we've seen a Phoenix before, right? We've seen, it's another one of these stupid red Phoenixes. It's got the keyword from this set. Nobody likes Phoenixes anymore. But the thing is that, you know, a lot of these cards are going to be format defining later, and people just haven't figured them out yet. You know, I think that a card specifically, like Planner Outburst, was getting a lot of hate. The 5-mana Wrath that destroys all non-land creatures. Everyone was like, oh, it's a 5-mana Wrath. Those don't see any play. Also, this one doesn't destroy lands. Also this, also that. It's like, come on, man. Card's going to be good. It's just going to take a while. Just let it happen.
Gotta just let it happen. I mean, there were people who didn't like Jace when he was first spoiled for many weeks until LSV was like, hello, this is the best card in the set. And everyone was like, oh, wait, LSV said it.
Right. And that happens a lot, too, is like, you have to wait until somebody who's got some clout says it, right? And you're just like, early on, your friend is like, dude, you know, I'm trying to think of an example, like Greenwarden of Murasa is the card that I think is just going to be great. The big, giant Eternal Witness. And you got to wait until somebody thinks it's good until people will think it's good. Until then, everyone's going to be like, it's way too overpowered or overpriced and not really very good. So that was my impression of players complaining about spoilers.
Aaron, how do you feel about the sort of current climate, if you will, of those reacting to spoilers?
Yeah, it's been pretty negative, and it's been negative to the point where it's actually kept me away from like my social media, where I just can't get away from it, where it's like, you know, just when I think that I've managed to, you know, kind of, you know, shelter myself from the people who are really negative, I find that the people that I've kept around are still negative too, and it's like I just feel like I can't win. I feel like the overwhelming thing that I'm seeing is people who are comparing current cards to previous cards, and I feel like I really started seeing this with Origins, and I think part of it was also on Wizards because I felt like, and people described Origins, like there were certain cards in Origins that people felt were reprints done right this time, where like we had the Renowned Hierarch, where they were going,
it was like the Strictly Worst set.
The Strictly
like
Worst
Wizards,
set, yes.
Like Wizards was going, okay, well we can't do Noble Hierarch again because it's too good, but here's how we would do it now if we were to do it over again. And I feel like we've seen several cards that fit that bill, but that has started causing people to look at them as if they were that card they're based based off of. And like, again, we're seeing it with the Eldrazi, where it's like, well, why don't they have this? Well, they're not those Eldrazi, they're these Eldrazi. The one card with the Eldrazi putting his hand through the head, that discard ability. Well, why isn't this Inquisition of Kozilek? Because it's not. Because this is a different time. This is a different format. You know, people are just constantly going, why isn't it this? And it's not. And
not every card has to be the best possible version of itself.
Right. And also, too, it's like, you know, I think that they're also thinking, in terms of thinking in a vacuum, you know, I've started looking at things from an eternal standpoint, where I've asked you, Ruben, hey, do you think this card will be good in Modern? Do you think this card will be good in Legacy? You not only have to consider how the card's going to be by itself, you have to consider how it's going to be with other cards. And when you think of eternal formats, there's a lot of cards out there that all it takes is one other card to make it good. So we don't know. Like, you just don't. And I think, like you said, until somebody makes a show of it, like Lantern Control, and shows you that these things are real, people aren't going to believe it, and that's really sad.
It's weird that that actually won a Grand Prix. I still don't know if we're in Berenstein or Berenstain like type. If we're in this universe or the universe that won with Lantern Control.
I feel like I passed out and woke up in a parallel universe where that was a deck, but it's neat that it won.
Great, we're on an episode of Sliders. Awesome.
I watched, without getting too much into it, you know, I watched the finals with him, and I was very entertained. And there were a lot of people that, you know, they want to live that dream, and they want to feel like they can win and still play a brew. And then the guy worked on it. You know, he put time into it between his, I think he had a 16th place finish before with it at a GP. And he was determined and he worked at it. It wasn't like he just woke up one morning and picked it up. He's worked, and
look, man,
and I'm here for it.
If you can win with a brew, that is what Magic wants you to do.
Right? I'm not mad.
Oh, I mean, like, there was people talking about, like, we're in the golden age of Modern right now. There were 20 different decks in the top 32. Like, that's amazing. Like, this ridiculous brew wins it, like, because the guy has practiced and he was, like, super efficient at it. It was amazing. I mean, you have a card like Skyrider Elf, which is blue-green X, a 2/2 flyer with Converge to put +1/+1 counters on it, and that's just strictly better than Gaea's Skyfolk. But, you know, it's like, well, it is, but I don't care. I mean, you know, it's like, well, what do you want, man? Like, this is actually literally one of the strictest better cards, but it's just like, nah, whatever. It's just like a dude, it's like a dork now, who cares? And I'm like, all right. I mean, you know, but these things happen where they kind of take the Skyreach Mantas and make them really good, and people are like, nah, I don't care. Who cares? Don't care. So let's bring up some cards we do care about. And that would be, I want to bring up my spoiler part, the Waterveil. I just got to post my video that I worked on, where I kind of went back and was like, let's take a look at all the Time Walks. You know, Time Walk is a sort of a well grained in sort of feeling and spell effect that's been going on ever since Magic's existed, and let's take a look at where this one fits inside it. I don't think it's going to like take over the metagame, but I would expect to see this, you know, maybe as a one of, and that's pretty much all you got because it's a game ender. But it goes onto your Lumbering Falls. It goes onto your Scorching Shambling Vent. You know, and it makes those cards completely ridiculous. And as a result, that's why the card is good. But like, what do you guys think about it, Ruben?
Yeah, part of the Waterveil is it's tough to quantify because, first of all, 6 mana Time Walks have a checkered past. Like, some of them are really good, like Walk the Eons has an entire, you know, had an entire standard deck around it, had an old extended deck that included it. Most of them are not great. Most of them, you know, they have their time in the sun. Like Time Stop is sort of a Time Walk that has a added benefit. But the 6 mana guys have a lot of trouble. This guy in particular, being you know, a one and done, it exiles itself, has a lot more problems. Like Temporal Mastery had this same problem, which was, yeah, it's great, but you there's no cool tricks you can do with it. There's no Snapcaster maging it or whatever. I think that this one's going to have a tough time because on the one hand, you want to put it in a control deck because that's where you think you're going to get to 9 mana with your blue cards. But taking an extra turn in a control deck is like not that great. You want to put it more in a deck that you're attacking, getting another attack step, get another activation out of your planeswalkers. I don't think there's a deck for it that exists right now. The good news is the format's going to be brand new. So who knows what's going to be available for Part the Waterveil. If there's like a blue-green kind of rampish thing that has 3 or 4 creatures in play, that uses Kiora to get a bunch of dudes in play and untaps a bunch of lands and can actually take advantage of this card, I think it's got a possibility.
Yeah, absolutely. Aaron, how do you feel about it?
I agree with Ruben. I think with one of the problems I've had with the control decks that I've been seeing in Standard is they have a really hard time closing out games. They're really good at answering everything. They're really good at keeping the game going long, but they don't win. They don't really beat you with the speed that I'm used to seeing control decks in the past. And so I agree with Ruben. If you take that extra turn, what are you doing with that extra turn? Like you're gonna do another dig 3 time? Like what are you really doing with that?
You're gonna attack with a 6/6.
You're going to attack with a 6/6.
That is one thing that Part the Waterveil has over a lot of its counterparts, is that it does create a threat. It doesn't just take an extra turn. You're not just drawing an extra card and playing an extra land.
And for me,
so this has a decent shot, I think. The issue is 9 mana is, boy, that's a hell of a lot.
9 mana is not a lot. Nissa is seeing tons of play. She takes 7 lands. There's one spell beyond that.
There's a Delve Time Walk in the format that you can get as low as 3 blue mana that people aren't even touching.
But doesn't make a 6/6.
But I'm just saying,
and
if
doesn't make your Lumbering Falls a 9/9 hexproof.
Right. It doesn't make the creature. It doesn't make the finisher. And that's the thing that Part the Waterveil does, is that we were talking about Awaken in general.
Wait a minute, you brought up something with Awaken that's really interesting. So if you read the text on Awakened, it says that the land becomes a 0/0 elemental creature. It's still a land. How does that work if it becomes a man-land creature? Like, do they contradict?
No,
Boy, layers are fun.
It replaces that and becomes a 3/3 hexproof with 6+1/+1 counters on it, or a 2/3 lifelink with 6+1/+1 counters on it. It will be a 6/6 during their turn, and they can kill it with Ruinous Path or other removal spells. But it does kind of go on top of the existing layer of creature.
Okay.
So you can attack with your 6/6. Then if they try to kill it mid-combat, you can turn it into a 9/9 with hexproof if you need to. I mean, I think that this card has potential. This card, it's impossible to know if it will be good at this point, because we don't know the rest of the set. There could be some common, like Treasure Cruise, that sneaks up on us. Martial Coup was the second to last card spoiled from that set. Hallowed Burial was the second to last card spoiled in Eventide. You never know.
Boros Reckoner was just put out with the spoiler on the Friday when it showed all the cards from Gatecrash.
Exactly.
Did not get a spoiler.
You never know
get a preview.
what's gonna be completely busted. And the Waterveil, it could be, but then again, so could half of these other cards.
Oh, totally.
Absolutely. So let's move on from my spoiler onto Brutal Expulsion. Note it's Expulsion, not Explosion. It's Expulsion. And it's pretty freaking bananas. It's Magma Spray plus sort of a Venser Remand, and it's not Venser because it doesn't return permanents, it just returns a creature. But regardless, to be able to return a spell, incredibly important, and also get another value of a shock, but not just a shock, one that will exile.
Magma Spray.
Yeah, which is a Magma Spray, which is incredibly powerful. And so, so Aaron, how do you feel about the blue-red instant?
I like it. I think, UR Thopters was a thing for a little while, and even control decks. I'd love to see blue-red become a control thing again. We've been seeing people try to make blue-black happen. We've been seeing people try to make blue-white happen. We've really kind of, I think we've kind of forgotten the idea of Jeskai control. And I don't mean Mantis Riders and that nonsense. I mean a Jeskai control deck. I would really love to see this become a thing. And with the Radiant Flames, I think it is, that could be your board wipe. And I'm all for it. I like to see what this can do.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that this is a super impressive card. I think that or both is unbelievably powerful.
Yeah.
The fact that you get to do both is absurd. I think that this is a card that's on the power level, honestly, of something like a Cryptic Command. I think that this is really that powerful.
You think this could see modern play?
Yeah. I mean, 4 mana is a high bar, but I think it's possible.
I mean, kind of maybe as a one of it. The problem is, if it was 3, it would be completely busted bananas, ridiculous. And at 4, it's one of those but now it's sort of fighting with it's fighting with us. Let's check and make sure we're not down. Hold on just a moment.
It looks to me like we're offline.
Twitch.tv/Magic Mics. Does it have a signal? We're bringing it up. We're bringing it up.
Looks to me like
We are live.
Perfect.
All right, cool. So sorry about that, folks. So anyway, where were we here? We were talking about Expulsion. So, again, it's a 4-mana spell, and there's a few things that are important about it, particularly when you get into the different devoid spells as they get lower in mana cost. Them having no color becomes kind of a big deal, particularly for, when you're back in Legacy, things like Red Elemental Blast and Blue Elemental Blast can't target this because of the fact it just has no color. And the fact that this could kill a pro-red creature, or maybe even a Goblin Pile Driver as a pro-blue creature. Why? Because it has no color, and that's actually kind of a big deal. So there's a lot of little edges on this card that make me feel like it could definitely see at least 1 to 2 of, if not even more, in Modern.
This card is super good at dealing with Hangerback Walker also, by the way, everyone.
Ooh,
It gives you tempo advantage against whatever they're doing after Hangerback Walker and gets rid of the Hangerback. So I think that this card, if Hangerback continues to be enemy number 1 of the format, which I think that it could be because, it can go in every deck. Mutavault was the same way. It can go in every deck, so you needed ways to answer Mutavault. In much the same way, every deck is going to need a way to answer Hangerback Walker, and this is a super good way to deal with it. In Modern, being colorless, that's a super big deal against Etched Champion. It's probably the best example of a card that you need to get rid of.
Right.
And luckily it deals 2 damage. So there you go.
Absolutely. So for those who are listening to us, Brutal Expulsion is a blue-red and 2 colorless instant with Devoid. You choose one or both. You return target spell or creature to its owner's hand, and it deals 2 damage to target creature or planeswalker. If that permanent would be put in the graveyard, you exile it instead. So with Hangerback Walker, absolutely insane. Champion, I think that's a fantastic kind of interaction you have there. And let's move on to Greenwarden of Murasa, so we can get through all these spoilers. A 2-green, 4 colorless, 5/4 elemental. When it enters the battlefield, you may return target card from your graveyard to your hand, and when it dies, you may exile it. If you do, return target card from your graveyard to your hand. So this card is basically ridiculous. I think with See the Unwritten, it is cards are
absolutely absurd.
The card is ridiculous. I mean, we have Den Protector in the format, and this thing is just like, just Den Protector's Big Daddy just hanging out. Like, well, you thought you got rid of this? No, I'm bringing it back again. Yes, and you just kind of keep this big chain with See the Unwritten. You get to both play it off of See the Unwritten and then get the See the Unwritten back, which you'll have Ferocious for now. I mean,
exactly.
that is ridiculous.
That's the big thing, is that it not only does it get back the See the Unwritten, it turns it on for a later See the Unwritten.
Right.
And so you can just start cycling them. Like, you get the first one, then you get 2 more. I think this card is absurd. Again, though, this is another card that's in a weird spot because we don't know what the mana is going to look like. They haven't really spoiled a lot of the cards, the cards that are Voyaging Satyrs and the kind of boring mana idiots that don't usually come out until later in the spoiler season.
Sure. Aaron, how do you feel about it?
I have to confess, for 5 minutes, I fantasized about putting that card in Legacy Church.
Wow.
I know.
You were so greedy.
5 minutes,
Yeah.
but I'm just saying, I agree. I think it's crazy. I'm here for it. I think it's a lot of fun. I'm a fan.
I think this card is fantastic. And
great value. It rebuys all the things that you want in the big red-green ramp decks. You don't even need to put it in a See the Unwritten deck. I mean, obviously it's great with that, but it's another big top-end kind of guy. It can restart your Den Protector cycle.
Yeah.
If there's something like a red-green ramp deck, obviously there won't be Devotion, but if there's something like that in the future, this will be the top end. This is the big payoff for playing a deck like that. And a 5/4 is no joke. That's a lot of damage.
Well, it kills Tassiger. It kills Siege Rhino. There's are certain numbers that have to be on the cards in order for you to go, okay, this can get there. This can do things. So when Woodland Wanderer was a 6/5, it's like, wow, those are big numbers. When most normally 4 damage or 4 toughness is very special. And this one also has 4 toughness, so it gets killed stuff like Roast, but so does Woodland Wanderer. So let's move on to another selection of cards we have here. here. Scatter to the Winds. This is the rare cancel. 2 blue and a colorless counter target spell, but it has Awaken 3 for 2 blue and 4 colorless. So for 6 mana, you can both counter a spell and get a 3/3. This card is ridiculous. This card is value. This card will be seeing a ton of play, in my opinion. This is exactly what control players want. They want it good early. They want it good late. They want to not only stop whatever it was you were doing or stop your threat, they want to make their own as a result and make something that could legitimately win the game, particularly when you're playing 2 or obviously I think just 4 of these in your control decks, because like it's just cancel, but with sweet upside. Ruben, how do you feel about it?
Yeah, I mean, people have been playing 4 copies of Dissolve. People have played 4 copies of Dissipate in the recent past. 3 mana counter spells are fine, you know. Yeah. When the biggest threat in the format costs 4, Siege Rhino. When there are cards in the format that you absolutely positively must counter, like Dragon Lords of various types. This is the kind of card you need. Ugins, another good example. You know, you need a card like this. And the price for putting this card in your deck is not high. You just need to want cancel, which, you know, you don't really want to play cancel. I mean, like, cancel's not great, but cancel like a 3/3 for 6 is awesome.
Well, yeah, and cancel itself has seen play in constructive environments.
It's made the top 8 of a Pro Tour in the hands of Mark Herberholtz in Yokohama in Time Spiral. So, like, that's a while ago. You know, they've printed a lot of cards since then, and the bar's been raised a little bit. But, you know, I think that early game, the first 2 copies of these being cancel, okay, it's fine.
Sure.
The third one being cancel, make a 3/3. That's pretty good. I like that. That'll stand in front of your 2/2 aggressive creatures. It starts putting the clock on the board. I think this card's a solid role player.
Absolutely. Aaron, how do you feel about it?
I was actually impressed with the art.
Yeah.
Everything you're saying is true, but this is a Raymond Swanland card, and he's the one who did Soul of Chandalar. I actually see a lot of similarities between Soul of Chandalar and the art on this one. I think it's beautiful. You see that in other red cards he's done, like Ruinous Minotaur. I'm going through them. Predator Dragon.
He did a Wormcoil Engine.
He also did
do Desecration Tide? Or Devastation Tide?
Devastation Tide.
I feel like that's the one.
That was the Proliferate, right?
And you can see the... no, Devastation Tide was Return All Non-Land
That was the
Miracle. Yeah.
Ah, yes.
But you can just very much tell it's his style, and I love it, and I think it's great, and I think everything you said is right, but I was very impressed with the artwork.
So nice. So... stood out to me. I think Aaron Forsyth just like quietly dropped the most ridiculous creature on Twitter. He was just like, hey, I got a spoiler. Here's a spoiler. And everyone's like, blah, blah, blah. It's a 4-mana 2/2. This car is crap. And then like when you think about what he just put on, what he just released into the world, a Woodland Wanderer is a green and 3 colorless 2/2 with Vigilance, Trample, and Converge. Converge is it enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it for each color of mana spent to cast it. So that means that absolute worst case scenario, which is you only have green mana or colorless mana, it is a 3/3 Vigilance Trampler for 4. And then when you have, you know, your Siege Rhino mana, and let's remember that thanks to these new upcoming Tango Battle, whatever you want to call them, lands, we're going to have the most ridiculous mana fixing for the next 6 months. It's going to be crazy. Yeah. Any 2 basic lands, every fetch land you have is crazy. This thing just for Siege Rhino mana is going to be a 5/5 with Vigilance and Trample, kills a Tasker, kills a Siege Rhino, and for the full 4, you get a 6/6 Vigilance Trampler for 4. That is really, really strong. Ruben, how do you feel about this one?
Yeah, this card is kind of absurd. You're kind of right. They kind of just stuck this one in there and was like, I don't know if anybody's actually going to think this is any good. But with your Beast Caller Experts, which was another card that was kind of just like, here's the thing. Maybe you guys will like it. It taps to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool for a 2 mana 1/1, I think is what it is. This thing eats Siege Rhinos if you cast it for 3 different colors of mana, which all of the decks are 3 colors now. If you make it a 6/6, I mean, sure, that's just gravy. But even as a 4/4 Trampler, it's fine in a 2-color deck. Let's assume for the moment that we're playing like a 2-color deck, which I don't know why we would play this in our 2-color deck. But, you know, it's Vigilance and Trample means that it tramples on top of Siege Rhinos. It doesn't trample over them because it's probably going to be a 5/5. But it holds them off, too. Yeah. This card is absurd. It's going to see a lot of play. It's splashable, so if you're like mostly a red-white aggro deck, you can splash this thing if you need to. Yeah, this card's insane.
Aaron, how do you feel about it?
I have to say, I wasn't very sold on it until you two started talking about it. And then I was able to really picture, it took me a while to really think about the vigilance part where, okay, so if you told me it was just 5/5 with trample, I wasn't very impressed with it. But then I realized that, you are attacking with it and it also makes a really good blocker as well. And now I can see what the fuss is about. So I'm here for it. So.
Yeah. I love the crap of this, and I feel like it's one of those. I mean, I've known Aaron for many years, and I know that it's, to me, it's something he would get a big kick out of. He's like, here's just this dork. Here's a dork.
Right.
Here's a new dork from the set. It turns out to be like the best creature in the set. Card is fantastic.
Well, here's another thing: is like Shaman of the Forgotten Ways is a card, right? And that adds 2 mana of any color, of any combination of colors, to your mana pool, and has a formidable ability. So he lets you get to formidable with this guy, and then has the formidable ability. I think that's going to be a deck for sure.
I think this card is.
Well, the question I have, though, is like, even though I am sort of sold on it, though, how do you think people will use it? So let's say they are, like, let's say the Abzan decks, for example, they have their 4 Siege Rhinos. Do you think this is like play set material? Like you'd play 4 of this, or would you be like, would it be Siege Rhino number 5? Or like, would you, is there room for both? And how many of this would you use?
You're not going to be able to replace Siege Rhino.
No, I'm not saying that.
I understand. I'm just saying, like, there's no scenario in which you're going to have just 2 Siege Rhinos and 4 of this guy. It's more or less how many more above that you want, or how many like Soul Tide decks or whatever that want this type of threat that is really big, really scary, but they don't have access. They can't have a Siege Rhino.
You want to find a 3-color deck that doesn't have a great 4-mana threat. I think Teamer is probably where you're going to end up with this guy.
Sure.
Like Savage Knuckleblade on 3, you want 4 of those. Doesn't really have a great 4-drop. This is where you want to be with that.
Yeah.
Sure.
Oh, this is the Teamer card they've been waiting for.
Yep.
So you're saying you wouldn't pair this with Siege Rhino?
Probably not.
You could, but probably not. I think, the thing about Abzan is that you're just picking the best cards that have immediate impact on the board. This, while it does have an immediate impact on the board of being a big dude, also doesn't, the thing about Siege Rhino is if it gets immediately Hero's Downfalled, you still Lightning Helix them. You still got value. This didn't. Right. So this is going to be much more of a thing where I don't think that, you're never going to beat Siege Rhino, but this can trump a Siege Rhino if you're playing against it, and is the kind of card that a different type of deck is going to want.
All right, we got to keep moving. So we have Void Winnower here, who is so basic that she can't even. And we have a 9-mana 11/9. Your opponents can't cast spells with an even converted mana cost, and 0 is even. They remind you of that. Your opponents can't block creatures with even converted mana costs. So, so that's really weird.
This card is super bizarre, and also is my new favorite reminder text on any card.
I'm sorry. To move back. Your opponents can't block with creatures with even converted mana costs. Is what I meant to say. So go ahead and rattle off the flavor for us.
Yeah. Well, it's not even flavor text. Reminder text. 0 is even.
Oh yes.
Is my favorite reminder. Like my old favorite is Mistform Ultimus, had all creature types, and this can attack as though it isn't a wall, which was like just so funny to me. But this has replaced it. This is so funny. Like you just need to remind people, oh, by the way, here's how numbers work. Yeah. It's just also they spoiled it on 9/9, which I thought was really clever. This is so bizarre. Like it's very Eldrazi-ish. Like it just does something super weird that like what are you even doing? Like we have like an Ashling's prerogative creature now. That's a weird thing to do.
It's a thing and a stuff.
Yeah. The cards that care about things that no one's ever cared about before. This is a bizarre card, and I don't know if it's going to be good. Like
maybe Aaron.
Yes.
I love it. Like, I'm completely here for it. I've been calling him Odd Thomas because of his, he shuts down the even abilities. Again, with me sort of living the dream, I was thinking about this in all sorts of decks. There were people, I have friends who play Legacy that have been talked about possibly using this against cards like, Miracles has Counterbalance and 2 and, Terminus and just craziness and all of that. And I was actually thinking about it more of like in a Tron matchup where it's like you can't cast Wormcoil Engine, you can cast Karn, but otherwise what else is there? Like, you really got to have,
Yeah.
it does limit your options. So I think, again, it's one of those cards that it does make you think, where you're going, huh, that's two, that's two, that's two, hey. And then there's all sorts of crazy applications for it. So I think this one's going to surprise us. I don't quite know how, but yeah.
It's got the potential.
The funniest thing about this card is that technically it passes the Doomblade test, but it doesn't pass any 3-mana removal test.
Yeah.
So
and it can
Ruinous
be killed
Path
by
just takes
Guilt
it out.
Leaf Winnower too.
Which is also adorable.
Yeah.
Because its power and toughnesses are different. Yeah.
Which is great. So let's move on to our final slide here of spoilers. We're going to talk about 3 lands. I'm just going to lump them all together. We have the Fertile Thicket. This is the first in what is called the spell land cycle, where the lands come into the battlefield tap, but they do a very spell-like thing. So we're going to talk about the green and black one, which Aaron is absolutely in love with, for good reason. Fertile Thicket is a common land that enters the battlefield tapped, and when it enters the battlefield, you may look at the top 5 cards of your library. If you do, reveal up to 1 basic land from among them, put that card on top of your library, and the rest on the bottom in any order. I think that card is very strong, but let's keep moving to Mortuary Mire, which is the black spell land, enters the battlefield tap. When it enters the battlefield, you may put target creature card from your graveyard on top of your library. So before we go to Shambling Vent, I want to talk about these 2 spell lands. For God's sake, Mortuary Mire plus Siege Rhino is a world that we're about to live in, and Fertile Thicket is able to fix the mana of the Sultais and the Temurs and the Abzans as best as you could possibly imagine it. And that's good times pretty much all the way around. So these cards are incredibly powerful. Aaron, tell me about your love of these green and black spell lands.
I can sum it up with just 4 words: life from the loam. Like, I just wanna dredge, I wanna mill, I wanna bring him back, I want all the bacon on my cheeseburger, and this is it. Like, I'm here for this. I'm so here for this. Like, I've played Loam Pox, and I certainly play Dredge, and I just I'm here. I'm loving it. And
well, girls just want to have fun, and these cards are there for you. That's what they're there to do.
Fertile Thicket is serious business. That card is unbelievably powerful. You get to play some number of lands less in your decks that use it, and that means you get to have more powerful cards in your deck. So that actually changes the makeup of your deck. Not to mention Mortuary Mire, which is the closest to Volrath's Stronghold we're ever going to get in Standard, and that card is quite good, particularly when you have the quality of creatures that we have in Standard now.
Right.
That's usually on turn 10, turn 12, you don't want to be top decking lands. Now you're going to be thinking, man, I have all these live draws. One of them is a comes into play tapped common. It's like, I think that Mortuary Mire is by far the most powerful of them. And second place is Fertile Thicket. I think Fertile Thicket is going to change the way you build decks. It's less powerful abstractly in games, but in terms of how you get to the makeup of your deck, it's much more powerful because you get to be a little bit greedier. You get to also, it helps you get your basics. It helps you with mulligan decisions. You can keep slightly worse hands. It's going to let you mulligan less in tournaments, and so both of those are super good.
Yeah,
the other card I thought of with Mortuary Mire is, particularly in a limited format, but we're starting to see those Eldrazi that have you can take a card from exile and put it in the graveyard to do an effect. So you think you're done with something, you think you delve something, your opponent thinks they're I'm going to pull your exile, put it in your graveyard, and kill something. You play a Mortuary Mire, and you're like, thanks, girl. Like, it's just,
exactly.
I think that's cool.
I mean, there is.
They ingested my 8/8.
They
put it back in my graveyard. Well, thanks, bud. That's great.
There's this kind of tension between, like, I'm playing a land that comes into the battlefield tapped, and it's going to get something from my graveyard I know is good on top of my library. Now, it's not going to be the random draw or the random spell that I could be top decking, but at least it is a known quantity. So it's not quite drawing a card, but it is setting up your draws in ways that is just kind of insane. And when we have these processing, these Eldrazi processors or whatever, that I feel they've really tried to push so hard that they're going to make constructed. I feel Oblivion Sower, even if it's an intro pack rare, well, so is Pelucranos. You know what I mean? Like, so they're not against putting really format defining cards in there, and Oblivion Sower is a very strong card. And so I think we may be surprised, at man, I just expect to see these lands all over the place. They're crazy good. Now, Shambling Vent, speaking of another crazy good land, it's Wizards doesn't want to make a bad man land, and for that I appreciate it. Other than that Lava Claw Reaches thing, we don't want to talk about it. But
we'll just pretend that didn't happen.
We just won't. And Shambling Vent is the white and black one. It only gets one ability. I thought it was going to get two, but it's enters the battlefield tapped. It's rare. It taps for a white or black, and white, black, and a colorless. It becomes a 2/3 white and black elemental creature with lifelink until end of turn. So this card to me is just like it was custom made for a person like Shaheen Surani, who is the Esper mainstay. It was custom made for the Gerard Fabianos of the world in the Sultai realm. This is a card that, particularly with Awaken, when we just looked at the counter spell that puts +3/+3 counters on a land, when you put it on here and you activate it, all of a sudden you have a 5/6, and that's a big deal. And that's not only going to kill your opponent, it is absolutely just going to take you right back in the game. This is the card, this is the land that after they play their board sweepers, this is the one they're hitting you with, and this is where like the aggro decks just start to lose, because they keep losing that value, that all the stuff that they've kind of gained up to that point. So, Aaron, how do you feel about Shambling Vent?
I like it. I think it's one of those lands. Again, I think people were, sort of expecting something else. And I think if you think about it now in terms of the current environment and the environment that we're looking at, I think it's going to be quite good. And again, you've been selling me on this idea of, the Awaken and being able to put counters on it. I didn't know that was a thing until we've discussed this. And so, again, I think by itself, okay, take it or leave it, but slap 3 counters on it and you're in business, because you need instant speed removal that can deal with it. And what do you have? I mean,
sure.
So, yeah.
Shambling Vent is cheap enough that it's going to be playable just because it activates for 3 mana. I can definitely foresee a world in which on turn 5 you tap the Shambling Vent to activate itself, and then Dramoka's command something to fight and gain 3 life. And knock off a creature. That's a big deal. Yeah. Shambling Vent being super cheap, having 3 toughness is a pretty big deal, because there's a lot of X2s in the format, or 2/2s in the format that this can stand in front of. Soulfire Grandmaster. There's a couple other newly spoiled guys. There's the 2/2 black Ingest Devoid guy that I think is actually kind of good. There's definitely going to be some sort of red haste creature that's a 2/1 or something ridiculous like that. So having 3 toughness is a big deal. This guy also already slots in perfectly into the best deck in Standard, and one of the best decks in Modern, and is just a super good card. And also all the man lands are great. They fix mana. And
they're great.
This card will see Standard play.
Yeah, this
and
absolutely.
Possibly Modern play.
And possibly Legacy. I'm just going to say.
Possibly.
I'm just going to say. I
Black
know it's right.
Like, Black and white is like not a thing that is great.
Well, it's not that great, but I'm just saying, like, this is like when the original Manlands came out, people didn't even really like them that much, and they're like, these cards aren't even that good. And of course, like, many months later, after it wins all the Pro Tours and after it's been climbing its way all the way back to these older formats, I stopped underestimating the Manlands, because they fix your mana and they're basically a spell all in one, and that's really important. And that leads you to decks that have 28 lands, because 6 of them attack, and that's a big deal. So those are our Zendikar spoilers for this week. I think they are Battle for Zendikar spoilers are absolutely terrific. And again, I get it that it's a weird set, and I get it that it may not look on the surface that it's like doing all these really cool and powerful things, but with so many moving parts and so many strange things that this set is doing that most are not, I am certainly, I have the feeling this thing is going to be really surprising in the first couple weeks of play, and then the Pro Tour happens, then we're really going to see some craziness going on as the pros try and break it. So I'm going to move on to Gather the Townsfolk, where we're going to talk about a community issue where Wizards announced that they were shutting down their community forums. And so I can really relate to this happening. So on October 29th, they are going to shut down their forums, and they are kind of giving people a warning so they can get the forum members to take away their content if they want to host it somewhere else, because they have these outlets now of Tumblr and Reddit and these places that are kind of well groomed and well taken care of, and they have moderation systems and all this stuff is there. And as you kind of saw the web grow up a little bit and saw websites kind of grow and do their thing, there was a time where it was just like in the late 90s, early 2000s that everyone had to have their own forums. Everyone had to have their own PHP BB forum, and you had to have a million usernames across a million different ones. You remember those? And like, remember when it was like your birthday and you got like 30 emails from 30 different message boards, and you're like, God, did I sign up for this message board? Ugh. And there's nobody there and nobody cares. And when there is somebody there, and there are people who care, that's a great thing, but there's problems that come along with those types of systems. For example, security. So when there is a security hole or security breach in the PHP BB software, which was very popular in the mid 2000s, that was a problem for all of these sites and all of their members, and possibly all of their like site data or whatever it was that was connected to the things that PHP BB was letting open. So I certainly understand that now we've kind of moved on, like we've kind of grown up into a world of social space where we have Reddit and we have Facebook and we have Twitter and we have Tumblr, and we have all these different avenues that are kind of cultivated by their own communities in their own way. And you don't have to like say, well, here's a sandbox and you can only play in our sandbox. Rather, you say, well, here's where everyone is playing in all these large, well kept sandboxes, and we're gonna go over there and talk to people. We're gonna go over there and tell people about what's going on with our products and and let them talk amongst themselves over there, and not kind of say you have to be on wizards.com in order to talk about Magic the Gathering. It's not something that's really necessary. Ruben, how do you feel about it?
Yeah, I used to be active on not active. I lurked. I was not really an active user. I read a lot of the forums on pre-Gleemax. Y'all remember Gleemax?
Oh, I remember Gleemax. Thank you very much.
Yeah. So
Aaron, do you have any idea what he's talking about?
I have no idea who that.
Gleemax. Well, don't worry about it.
Is it anything like Baymax from Big Hero?
No, it's nothing like that.
Okay.
It was a brain in a jar.
Don't worry about it. But yeah, Gleemax was sort of like a experiment that didn't work. It was trying to be like MySpace for Magic, and it just didn't work. It just didn't happen. It never came together. And then the forums sort of didn't know what they wanted to do, and the site was like kind of unusable. Became a mess a little bit, which kind of sucks, because the forums were like a great place for a lot of people where you could have really in-depth conversations. But then Reddit became a thing, and then the people that I imagine that the thought process is like, well, this is like kind of a thing that people don't use. People use the Magic Reddit and Tumblr and Twitter and all these other sites where people can talk to each other. And we don't have to, not only do we have to not do more work, we have to do less work than we already do. So it's like kind of a no-brainer to just shut it all down.
Aaron, how do you feel about it?
Yeah, I'm not surprised. I've never really visited their forums before, so I was browsing them as you two were talking, and like nobody's posted in the legacy one since like 2014, at least the forum that I'm looking at. And the one thread that I did click on, like images are broken and links don't work, and it's in pretty bad shape. I do think it's kind of sad though. I think that rather than, I don't think they were trying to say that like you have to play in our sandbox, but I like to choose what sandbox I play in, and each forum has their pros and cons. I mean, let's be honest, there are some reasons why I won't go to Reddit, there are some reasons I don't go to Salvation, but it's nice to have your choice. And like, okay, let's say there's one topic that you're going to get a better reception on a different site, you go to that site. I like having my pick, and so I'm always sad when I have less options to choose from, even though they haven't clearly been updated in a while.
I think we do have quite a few options. I mean, just to kind of wrap this all up, I mean, in terms of the position I was in a couple of years ago at SCG, I was like, we're going to use Facebook comments on the articles, and that was big deal. And there were people like, why are you getting rid of the SCG forums? Yeah, there were SCG forums. There were threads for everything, and they had many years of that stuff. And at the time I was in charge of the technology, and I was like, we can't. We went, like part of me, I'm also the marketing manager. So like part of me was like, we want to be where people are talking, where people see other people talking, and that's in Facebook. And now everyone's using Facebook comments. And for the forum, we even tried to keep it up for a while, but there were security concerns that would pop up. And so it's like, you want to use your web developer time to go patch this software that only holds archived data. Or do you say, look, you make a zip file and you take that stuff down, and if you ever needed it, it would be there for you, because it's not worth it just as a business. And even I think Wizards, Hasbro understands that it's not worth keeping up these forums in like, you know, a minute of a developer's time to work on these forums and patch these forums than it is for them to do literally anything else.
There is a Reddit thread about this, by the way, where people are sort of lamenting the passing of you know, the use of horses giving way to the use of cars, because it's like something that's just like not used anymore.
Right.
If you're not a fan of Reddit, if you don't love Reddit, one of the big comments on this thread points out that nogoblinsalowed.com is more of a classic style message board if you're interested in having a lot of that style of discussion.
And
a lot of folks from the Wizards forums have migrated over to that website. So if you're more interested in that, nogoblinsalowed.com. And you can also look at the Reddit conversation on the mothership shutting down the forums.
Absolutely. So we're going to move on from Gather the Townsfolk into Desperate Ravings. We're going to talk about a Reddit thread this week that absolutely got set on fire, and it was about a blind player at a pre-release. This was like, it's one of those like when the Reddit threads get so big, it starts to like get into the all subreddit and like, you know, people who have no idea like, what is this about? I don't understand Magic. Why is this important? And you just kind of, you can quickly and easily look through this Imager album, and it's going to be linked in the comments and linked in the description, where you have a blind boy here who is able to use a Braille typewriter and type out the cards that were in his sealed pool, as it appears here for Magic Origins, and put them on the sleeve itself. And he was putting the card name on the top and the bottom, so whether or not they were turned around or sideways, he would be able to figure out the name of them. And you know, his opponents would help him by telling them everything that was on the board. And it's like one of the most inspirational things. It's like, you know what? There's nothing that can stop you from enjoying Magic, and there are people who care enough to work with you. There's a way that you can play this game regardless of a disability, and I think that is incredibly it's just heartwarming. It's hard to just have anything negative about what's going on here. It's this incredible community, you know, building around this guy. Aaron, how do you feel about it?
I don't think it's the same person, but I recall meeting somebody. I went to an open in Seattle several years ago, and this is back when Junk Reanimator was the thing in Standard. And there was a blind gentleman there who didn't have any eyes. Like he was unmistakably blind, and he was playing Junk Reanimator. And I remember people with their sight had a very difficult time piloting that deck. And I remember, myself included, I had a very hard time piloting that deck. And I remember just sort of being in awe because he was playing it better than I could. And that was a deck where you're having to, you know, Grizzly Salvage into Unburial Rights and being able to know what those things did. I was amazed. And I was more amazed that people were cool about it, because unfortunately there are some negative people out there. And I admit that I was watching him and almost kind of waiting for somebody to be stupid about it and just be like, don't. And luckily everybody was very gracious. And I think that's great. And I've seen other people, you know, in my local scene, there's a young man who I believe has cerebral palsy, and he's completely wheelchair bound, and I think he's immobilized from possibly the waist up, and his mom plays for him, and she comes to the 9-round GPs and plays them all, and for me it's very inspirational, because I admit that sometimes I can be a little lazy, so there are times where it's like, I don't want to do this, I don't feel like doing this, and it's like, he can do all that, like he can pull out a typewriter and make his own cards, make his own sleeves. You can do this, like, come on now. And that's how I choose to apply it and motivate myself.
Yeah.
Right.
This is awesome. Obviously, there's like nothing bad about this, but the one thing I wanted to say was that the very first photo is a Magic player on a typewriter, which is like the hipsteriest thing I've ever heard of. But besides my snarky, stupid comments about that, the fact that this game, which has so many visual elements to it, you know, a lot of people have playmats and sleeves that have different arts on them, not to mention the arts that are on the cards, not to mention needing all of the information that's on the cards themselves, the powers, the toughnesses, the flavor texts, even in addition to the rules text and the names and all, and the mana costs and all that kind of stuff. Right. The fact that someone who cannot see those is still able to appreciate the game speaks to two things. One, how great Magic is if he's going to go out of his way to play this game, because, you know, there are so many barriers to entry. And the game is just so great. And two, how great the community is. And this is a lovely thing that these folks, this is from Lancaster, England, right? And this is just a fabulous, inclusive community, and kudos to all those guys.
I do wonder though if there would be any way or any point in time where maybe they would consider, maybe have like, wizards would make sleeves or things like that or make cards. I don't know. I just feel
Sure.
bad that he has to do it himself all the time. And
Yeah.
we have the
it's a
cards
small audience, but
well, I mean, we
sure.
have the cards in how many languages and
Right.
so
Yep, I understand. So I just wanted to kind of make that sort of a thing, and we can talk about it and say it was a great moment sort of in Magic culture right now where we kind of celebrated this happening, and I think that's fantastic. So we're going to talk about some splash damage. And the first splash damage that I wanted to bring up was there's really some amazing tournaments going on right now with Hearthstone. Hearthstone is... Well, I mean, it's blown up. Let's put it that way. It has exploded in its player base. It has exploded in its tournament scene, and certainly in its viewership. The viewership that they're getting is multiples over what the average SC or over the average MTG event is getting. So, but you also look at their tournament structure and you look at their tournament prizes. There's a $40,000 Grand Prix that was just announced. I believe it was for Sweden, where there's only 200 players that can play in it, 200 player cap, and then Kibler kind of jumped on and was like, well, there was a 24 player $240,000 prize pool for the team league. Yeah, he made what, 10 grand? Is that right?
He made 10 grand. His team made 30K, and his
Yeah.
team of 3 people.
Yep. Just hung out, played some Hearthstone, making 30K or making 10K, as you do, which is also
why
the first
am I hanging
prize.
out with you two?
The first prize now for a Grand Prix win he made in Hearthstone, and that's great. And so there's just, it's one of these things. It's like, well, why haven't the Pro Tour payouts changed so long? Why did it take so long to kind of get our Grand Prix kind of up to the level they are? And I think it's pretty obvious that with sponsors, with the ability to have other companies kind of elevate your brand and say that you are now more legitimized, you are now more important, you are now able to talk about the numbers and the amounts that get people going like, wow, like winning $40,000 is awesome, is a lot of money. But holy snap, winning, $1 million for the Dota Invitational or whatever, winning, what was it, like $30,000 a piece or $50,000 a piece for the first place rather for the team event?
League? So you're talking about the Archon Team League Championships, which happened last weekend. First place was won by a team called Nilium, Nihilium, and that's 3 guys. Yeah, it's the same corporation. I don't know if it's the same guys, but those 3 guys between them won $250,000. Those 3 people for playing Hearthstone. Yeah,
and that's amazing.
That team league is sponsored by Archon, which is one of the largest sort of
esports
conglomerates. Yeah, esports team conductors. I don't know how to define them, but they have some major sponsors, not just things like the guys that make the gaming chairs or the guys that make the gaming headsets. But if you go to, for example, DreamHack, which is one of the things we were just talking about that's happening in Stockholm, you go to their website and they are sponsored by Monster Energy Drink and Intel.
Wow. And if you had a Pro Tour
let me tell you,
that had those names on it, you would have
the
people...
Magic the Gathering Pro Tour sponsored by Apple, or look, sponsored by
Coca-Cola. Who cares?
We don't even need to aim that high. If we were sponsored by the Penguin Book Club, anything that makes over $100 million a year, then they'd be like, yeah, sure, let's pump some money into it and see how many more viewers you can get. Because right now you watch the Magic Pro Tour stream, it's got 30K, 40K viewers. Individual people just streaming Hearthstone have more than that. So it's in a weird spot for Magic, trying to compete with these esports.
Yeah, Aaron, how do you feel about it?
I think it's interesting that we're hearing this, and they released some information on the 10th last week that were updates to the Grand Prix prize structure. And for the most part, it seems like they were really selling this as being like big, news. But now that you're telling me all of this, it's like, well, the winner of an individual Grand Prix is now slated to take home $10,000 starting in 2016, and you're like, what was that number you just threw out there? Like,
sure,
$250,000 for the winning team.
Right. It's a lot. It's a lot of dollars.
Come again? There's just a consistent feeling for me when I see Magic, give me news, and I see what other sports are doing, and I keep looking back, and I'm like, your move, and it just doesn't seem to come close, and yeah.
I mean, the other thing that's kind of baffling about this is Magic doesn't even have to go look for a sponsor.
Yeah.
They're owned by Hasbro.
Yeah.
This is just the Magic Pro Tour brought to you by Hasbro. Like, they don't even have to do anything. They don't have to go outside. They just call the guys, the boss's boss, and say, look, here's the thing we want to do. We would sell more things. Do you want to sell more things?
Yeah. So there's a lot of opportunities there. We've talked about this in the past, and I don't want to harp on it too much. I feel like it's just one of those things where it's like, hey, here's kind of a point in Magic history where if certain things were to happen, certain people were to start to get involved, maybe they would blow up, and maybe you would have winners who win $100,000 for a Pro Tour, or win $1 million for a Pro Tour, or whatever it may be ultimately. And how much excitement and how much energizing you're going to get when those things move in that direction that quickly or that far than where they were.
And here's another takeaway. This show's called Magic Mics, and we just spent the last 5 minutes talking about Hearthstone. That's not good. It's not good news.
Shade.
Such.
I'm just saying, that's not.
No, I mean, it's something to point out. Again, this just to me is like, I'm a culture junkie. I love Magic because I love Magic culture. That's why I started the show, because you guys are great at also noticing kind of what happens in Magic culture and noticing how people and how the community reacts to things and what we like and what we don't like. And this is something that we're paying attention to. This is something we want to bring attention to, because you're never going to fix it.
We only roast the ones we love. We only roast the ones we love is the saying of the Friars Club in New York City. That's good. We only care and target and we are snide and kind of annoying and stupid sometimes because we want Magic to succeed. We're so passionate about this thing that all of us love.
Right.
That's why we hate on it so much sometimes. It's all constructive. We want Magic to succeed, and it's painful when there's opportunities that we feel they're missing.
Sure. And there's all sorts of ways that happens, but we do this because we love the game and not just because, we're here to tear anyone down or tear anything down. We want everything to get better. So on that note, if you will, we're going to turn the corner. We're going to go around to the finisher. And the finisher this week, well, Matt Sperling wrote an article entitled Everything You Wanted to Know About Magic But Were Afraid to Ask, that has some excellent lessons gleaned from his 2 decades in the game. It really is a really nice article.
Great
article. Good job. Such as when a bad player wins a tournament, their deck is usually better than it looks. And trust...
#Lantern Control.
Yes, and trust everyone but cut their cards. So what's another critical life lesson that you've learned from Magic that you'd like to share, Ruben?
Well, I would like to say that the only thing we know about the future is that it will be different than what it is today. Except for Splinter Twin in Modern, which will always be the best deck.
Aaron?
Oh, man. Well, the thing that I've learned is if at first you don't succeed, add more life gain to deal with those stupid red cards.
I can't deal with
more ley lines, more core firewalkers.
Yeah.
Keep it.
All the kitchen fakes.
Well, for me, I see new set spoilers like children. Everyone thinks they're bad until someone figures out how to make them work. Yeah! Yes!
Nice. How to put them to work.
You build that dad empire.
That's a good message.
I have 5 children. You build that dad empire until they're mowing the lawn for you. That is a goal.
Yeah.
I'm just imagining like one of them on a hamster wheel, like running the stream or running the computer, just keeping it going.
Yeah, you save so much on medical bills.
Can you run an 8-man yet? Do you have an 8-man in your house?
Not quite, but
Kids, sets out. Sit down.
Yeah, sorry, we're 3-on-3.
It's too bad you can't play competitively, because I could see you like doing well at a GP or making. Who did you test with, my kids?
Yeah.
Nice, thanks.
Got a whole test.
Me and my children, we just sat down and broke us a metagame. Little Susie.
Our metagame is out of control in the Irwin house.
Breaking that Irwin control and that Irwin aggro. Oh Lord. So, ladies and gentlemen, that ends.
With control.
We're going to move into our final slide. Thank you, Ruben. Thank you, Aaron. Ending another episode of Magic Mics. Thank you for joining us here to discuss all things Magic. I want to thank my co-hosts, you guys, for watching. Hope you follow, like, tweet, favorite, share, and do everything social that tells people we exist. Catch us online at twitch.tv/magicmics or Twitter at magicmicescast and on Facebook at facebook.com/magicmics. Talk to us privately at magicmicspodcast@gmail.com. Follow the audio-only podcast at magicmicspodcast.libsyn.com or find us on iTunes or join us here next week, same time, same place, for another episode of Magic Mics. Now, we're going to go back to the finisher because we ain't done. We're not done. Right. Before we say goodnight here, everybody, we have an announcement. So, the Magic Mics is going to make a Patreon because that's just something, we're going to do. It's going to be great.
Podcasts do now, yeah.
It's how we do. It's okay. And we're going to make that Patreon, and we have some ideas of what we want to do, and we would like to hear from you guys who spend time listening to us talk about what you would like to see us give away or do, what ideas you guys have thus far, and any suggestions you may have. And you can go to our subreddit, which is reddit.com/r/magicmics. It is the Magic Mike subreddit. And you can also use the subreddit to discuss the show or suggest ideas for new episodes and all that good stuff. I've made a thread there. You can find it there. And this allows you to kind of get involved in the process and tell us, what would you like to see out of this type of endeavor? Obviously, you don't have to support us in this manner, and that's fine. And there's no hard feelings, But it's one of those, if you like the show and you want it to grow and you want us to do things and you want us to kind of expand, or you want something that we can kind of do for you in exchange of this type of sponsorship, things like, leave voicemail messages and things, or voicemail greetings, which is stuff that other Patreon podcasts or podcasts supported by Patreons have done. And that's some of the stuff that I've already kind of included in that thread as sort of, conversation starters. But go to the Magic Mike subreddit, subscribe to that subreddit. Let's get some conversation going there. Obviously, I'm a moderator. I would like to find more moderators so we can kind of get things going. And yeah, so that was just something we kind of wanted to wrap the show up with. And Ruben, you have any thoughts on this thing?
I would love to see, as the Wizards forums migrate over to things like Reddit, I would love to see our podcast have some discussion during the week. I'd like to hear more from the audience, see what you guys would, if something happens during the week that you think that might be worth discussing on the show, feel free to start a thread there. And also we want to get this Patreon thing going and up and running. And we have some ideas, but, certainly our audience is probably going to have better ideas, at least some of them. So please comment.
Yeah. Aaron, how do you feel?
I'm definitely, I approve of this. I think that's sort of the, having a Patreon is sort of the way of determining legitimacy, where it's like, I'd like to say that, Magic the Amateuring has one and Limited Resources has one, and those are shows that I certainly look up to, and I want to feel like I'm, among them, where it's like, I'm on a show that's doing well enough where we can have stickers and we can have jelly bracelets or buttons or things like that. And, for me, it makes me feel like we're advancing and we're moving on to the next level, and I want to be part of that. So
absolutely,
you should help me make that happen. Help us
you
make
guys,
that happen.
I want to take this podcast to the next level.
Yeah.
So, I don't know if I'm ready for that, Ruben. We're moving.
I don't know.
Fast.
I don't know if we're ready for that kind of commitment.
Wow, you guys. It's getting serious.
I don't want to ruin the friendship.
Wow.
Right. I don't. I need a minute to think about it.
Okay. and I have a few successful Patreons, and it's a fantastic service. I support, I support many in the Magic community, and I feel like, this is a way that you can say, I like what you're doing. I want you to do more of it. Here's a way that I can inspire you and tell you that I want you to make more, and this is what we can do. So I'm going to wrap it up here with our final slide once more. Again, thank you guys very much for watching. We will see you here next week at 11 o'clock Eastern for another episode of Magic Mics. Good night, everybody.